Welcome everybody back to a very special Game Vault podcast. I'm your host, Mark. I thought I would try a little pilot program since we will have to figure out something to do once the two baby Game Vaults come in the next couple months here. That will see Tom and Jen unable to make it for the podcast any longer. So I thought I'd try a little bit of a solo podcast here. We're going to do the typical, I'm going to say what I've been playing, talk about, things that I liked about it and all that. Just won't have the commentary back and forth, but just sort of keep you guys on top of what I've been playing. Then I'll go through some news here, and then I got a very special third segment, which we may mess around with if we do it in this format going forward. That will also lead into the retro roulette game. Since I won't necessarily have the wheel to do it, I thought I'd try to do it in my own special way, a little bit differently, just so we don't blow through some of Tom's games while Tom is unable to play them. So without further ado, let's start off with the obvious. If you've been watching on the stream, I have been playing Persona 3 Reload with you guys. Got through one long stream, and the second stream a little shorter, but I just wanted to get it in before the weekend here. But so far, the game is great as usual. The only thing that's really interesting about this new one is that when I played Fez on the PSP, or rather the PS1 version through PS Classics, or whatever the PS3, thing was. And so I played it with a female protagonist. Because I just thought she looked cooler than the male protagonist. But in this one, it's a traditional original Persona 3. Seeing some of the choices feel a little bit more natural than they did with the female character, at least early on here. I didn't get very far with my playthrough before. But yeah, this, once again, some really good voice acting. Probably most notable is Liam O'Brien, which you don't see in many games anymore because he's more moved on to a director. Liam of Critical Role fame. So it's interesting to hear his voice for the first time in a game and notice it. But yeah, outside of that, the graphics are great, and definitely the upscale. It's definitely playing off the Persona 5 vibe in terms of high fidelity Persona graphics. I think the one main thing so far going through is that it's got me hype as hell for Persona 6 whenever that comes out, because this story is okay. Nothing very grabbing you early on. The other ones had some really nice hooks to the early game. This is just weird with the Dark Hour and the Tartarus and stuff like that. I'm sure it opens up more, as most Persona games do when you get through the first 10-hour tutorial, which isn't as bad as like when we joke around about Final Fantasy 13. Personas is really, they just slowly introduce all the aspects to the game because there is a lot going on. You have your social links, you have your Persona upgrades, you have what to do during the day to upgrade skills, you have fighting in Tartarus, then you have the main story. So there's a lot of things. So they slowly throw it at you over a course of, 10 hours or so. Roughly. I think Persona 5 is a little longer. I think it's by the time you're through the second palace that you really got everything you need. And then just the Persona stuff slowly as you level up inside the Velvet Room there. So far, loving Persona 3 playthrough. Hopefully I can get it done, or at least moderately through it before, Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth comes out at the end of the month. And that leads perfectly into the other thing that I played this week. I did attempt to stream it, and I do apologize for anybody that did show up for that stream. The PlayStation 5 was acting a little funky. Not entirely sure what happened. Maybe dust. Maybe it was having that and the Xbox next to each other and the small setup I have by my PC for streaming. But it wasn't overheating. It wasn't telling me it was overheating, but maybe going to rest mode on its own is PS5's way of saying that. I don't know. Let me know on Twitter if that's what you think it was. Once I moved it out to my living room where there's more space and my normal gaming setup, I had no problems, and I went through the demo with relative ease, not even like a loud noise coming from the PS5. So I'm going to test it out here because I am about 80% sure I may stream Rebirth on the channel here. Anytime I want to play it, I'll just jump on stream instead of playing it on my own here. So that might be some real long streams. It'll just be, I just want to get to the aspect of if I'm going to start trying to stream some newer games, I just wanted to play it in the way that I play games, in the sense of, playing it, through large chunks. Now, I may decide not to do this just for the sheer fact of trying to, I won't get as good of a quality playing it through stream for you guys, but I would love to hear what you think. If you think you'd be interested in watching me play through Rebirth, and I'm also leaning towards there's probably going to be shitty people that will spoil things. So we'll say, 75, 80% that I may do it, but still a chance I won't. But I will, definitely continue Persona 3. That is number one. With a bullet. Maybe I'll find another new game to stream as well and kind of run myself ragged with 3 games, but we'll see. Just stay tuned. It's all very fluid right now, since we will be down to members for a few months. Just trying to figure out what I can do, on my own personally to keep everything going. So with that said, I did get through the full demo. It is the Nibelheim flashback sequence when the gang is sitting in calm. So what I imagine will take place is you'll get, I'm going to say about an hour before this is just them getting to calm, and with some cutscenes and some things like that. You may even get a Zack segment maybe before you get to this part. And then you'll get to this part. I may play through it again, if I'm trying to figure out different affinities and stuff like that, rather than being able to skip it like I did in, like I can for playing the demo. Now, if it tells me that anything that happens in that flashback has nothing to do with your affinity, golden saucer date stuff, then I will skip it. But yeah, so game looks good. I don't know how old this build is. I hope they sharpen a couple things. There was some bad textures, but no pop-in stuff in terms of like in Remake, Cloud's apartment door number and stuff like that. There's nothing too bad there. I mean, the telephone's a little grimy, but again, that seems like stuff you can touch up in the last few weeks beforehand. Combat feels amazing. I didn't fully learn how to do certain things, but I've learned about them from watching other people play through the game and people that I trust on YouTube and Twitter, or not Twitter, Twitch, and just seeing the different ways that the combat is being used and slight things they've changed. And it's been a while since I played Remake, so I couldn't, get into the flow of combat yet, but it'll get there. But yeah, Sephiroth felt amazing, but obviously he did. He's a completely powered up character. And he can make the fights trivial because he has access to the level 3 magics. So if you have the MP and the ability, you can just hit them with something real big if they're weak to it, and it'll basically destroy every monster, even the bosses that you fight. 2 things that I noticed and is curious about is now higher level magics take 2 ATB cages instead of just 1. So it's a little bit more risk reward in that aspect. I find that very fascinating. And, is a way, to not just allow later fights, if you've leveled up your characters ridiculously, to be too easy. So yeah, it was the other thing was the ability to have different abilities be more effective in the air than on the ground. That was one of the downsides to Remake, was the air combat wasn't too great, and mostly you just defaulted to Barret. And then when you didn't have Barrett, it was like, oh, I block, maybe that gets him in the air, and it would just kaput. Not really very, very much the same flow as the ground combat was. So that has improved. The synergy stuff seems fun. I can't wait to see what you can do with all of them. The fun thing I did learn was that each one has their own synergy. So it's not like, let's just use Sephiroth and Cloud, for example. It's not just that Sephiroth and Cloud have the same, shared synergy abilities. They each have their own with that person. So that means that whatever combination you want to be, it's going to be ridiculous. And there's going to be so many different combinations in there for just the ability to, use different things to your advantage, like, teaming up like a Barrett with a Tifa. Tifa's in. I wonder if it's something where Tifa is in doing the punching, or Barrett shoots him out of the air and then Tifa hits him on the ground. Or as they've shown in the thing, Barrett and Aerith, where you can use guns and magic. It's going to be interesting to see what the combinations are going forward. But the other thing, final thing really, the way they laid out Nibelheim, it was great. Because when I first walked into town, I was like, did they completely redesign the town? Because it's a very distinctive map. For those of us that played Final Fantasy VII a good bit, probably more for Tom than myself. But you first walk in, you see all the buildings are scattered a little bit, and then finally you walk up these set of stairs, and then you get plopped right in what is the middle of the Nibelheim map. You get the water tower, you get the inn, you get the general store, you get your house, you get Tifa's house. Right there as it was in the PS1. And then there's stuff past it, there's a couple houses past it, and then you get to the stairs that lead to Shinra Mansion, or Manor, or whatever they call it, there, and then to the right is Mount Nebel. So they just added stuff on the periphery to sort of make the town seem bigger, which just has me excited about all the other towns you go to, that they might expand on those. Maybe not have things in them for you to do, but sort of just make them feel larger. Like even the glimpses we got of Calm, I'm excited to see what an expanded, Calm looks like. So really excited. Going to play the open world part and probably have more comments on the combat for next podcast, since that'll come out on the 21st. And maybe we'll have a whole Final Fantasy VII Rebirth conversation with the 2 demos with Tom for next episode. Yeah, so that's mainly what I've been playing. I've thrown on the sports stuff while, watching people play through the demo. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone stuff, but nothing vastly important. Haven't really got back to Last of Us Part 2, just because the other things have come out. But I am looking forward to getting back to that with the director commentary on, just to get some insight to some of the stuff. I do recommend, speaking of Last of Us 2, watch the documentary. It is fantastic and well worth your time if you're around and into games at the time when that whole fiasco happened between February and June. With the leaks and how long certain decisions were in play. And it's just a really fascinating documentary. The first one was pretty good too, but this one seemed a little bit better. So be sure to check that out. All right, let me go into the news. Speaking of Persona 3, it has become the fastest selling game in Atlas history, with over 1 million sales in its first week out. And that was what I was mentioning before. The final Persona 6 is going to be an event when it comes out. And this is more proof of it. And that was the million sales is in spite of it being a Game Pass game, which is mind-boggling. So the main thing is that, these games, as they're getting more and more to a wider audience, they're getting more and more popular just because they have such a sense of having the hardcore RPG mechanics of, the little bit of Pokemon stuff too, with the personas and things like that. And also on top of the visual novel stuff, in a sense with the high school stuff, and then all the abilities to farm and grind and stuff like that. And it's just if you can get if you're okay with the very anime story, this has all the mechanics of traditional JRPGs, and it's no surprise that in this current era it's selling like crazy. So yeah, if you haven't picked it up already, be sure to do that, because I think it's a really good remake, and I will go to bat for the Persona games. There's some content that's a little bit crazy. Like, this has a major trigger warning. I forgot to mention this when I was playing. The way they summon the Personas is they put a gun to their head and shoot. So if you have any sensitivity to suicide or images like that, you're probably not going to want to play this game, because they don't shy away from it and they don't censor it or anything like that. So yeah, if you're cool with that, or it doesn't bother you, then feel free to go at it. But still, 1 million sales with a game on Game Pass is kind of amazing for an RPG that used to be very niche. So moving on. Speaking of Final Fantasy Rebirth and remakes, the director of Final Fantasy VIII said that he would choose to change the junction system if they do a Final Fantasy VIII remake like they did for Final Fantasy VII. Kitase said he'd really rework the battle system, noting that players struggled with the stat-heavy junction system. And he's not going to say it, but really broke the system. He said, I think you may remember we had the junction system, and that thing about systems was the enemies leveled up in line with what the player's level was, and obviously you had to use the junction system and how you customize that to overcome the challenge. And I think it was very difficult for some players to get into, depending on player skills. Sometimes they just didn't work out the best way of doing it. So he would like to just remake it. It would just, if they even consider doing it, it'll take a while, obviously. And this is where both, the directors of 6 and Kitase here with 8, are both saying, like, we're looking like 10 to 20 years if we even start these. So, and when you think about it, it took, at least 20 years for Final Fantasy VII Remake to come out. So, yeah, I feel like these games, you're probably not getting them anytime soon, but I do say 8, 9 should get the same treatment, just like Resident Evil 2 and 3 did. But, well, we'll see. We'll see how well Rebirth sells. And sticking with the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth news, a little sad news here for some fans out there, probably definitely our own Tom. Vincent and Sid will not appear in the combat encounters. So in Rebirth, so I don't know if there's going to be DLC where you'll get to play as them and fight as them, but it'll be similar to how Red 13 was in Remake. So I think what it means is that they may be in a fight, but you won't be able to control them. So you wouldn't, be able to, control them, or they might just not be there at all. I think Hamaguchi says they won't be present in battles at all, but that could also be him hiding, a special situation or something. But Sid and Vincent not going to be party members in the game, which makes sense when you line up what we've seen from all the battle trailers so far. That you haven't seen any of them fight yet. So we'll just wait for part 3 to get our favorite gun-wielding vampire. And the I guess he's pretty much a dragoon in Sid. But we do get the airship and all that stuff, because what I had heard is that the game's probably going to end at the Forgotten City, which is the end of disc 1. And for those of you out there that remember, Final Fantasy VII was 3 discs, but they were not equally distributed hours on the disc. Disc 1 held the majority of the game. Probably, you could say, depending on what you do in disc 2, you could say close to 2/3 of the game is on that first disc. Disc 3 is basically just the final dungeon, and things to allow you to clean up anything you missed in the previous 2 discs. The reason, because back when they did them on CDs, the reason it had to go 3 disc and 2 and 3 didn't have a lot of the game on it was because after disc 1, the story really propels forward. And if I remember correctly, there's more FMVs in the latter half of the game. So obviously back in 1997, they take up a lot more space on a CD. So disc 2 and 3 just were there just because they needed a lot more room for FMVs than they did on disc 1. So natural ending point here, and they can easily squeeze in the final 2 stuff, for the final game here. But it still means that you're probably looking anywhere between 40 to 100 hours, depending on how much you explore and do side quests with it. But if you're looking to level up and get in some good combat sequences with Vincent and Sid, you're out of luck. So no hyper jump or Death Gigas for us just yet. So yeah. And final news that is not Persona or Final Fantasy related. The Game Pass games for this coming February. I believe first one will be Madden 24. Will be available for download. Resident Evil 3 remake. And then you'll get games like Train Sim World 4. A little to the left, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Played Up and Return to Grace. And then MLB The Show will be out in March. And if you were playing either of these 2 games, the 2 games leaving are Galactic Civilizations 3, if you're doing PC Game Pass, and Opus Echo of Starsong. So if you were playing those games, I would hurry up and try to finish those before February 15th. So that's all I have for the news. So our special segment here is we're going to do. I'll get a little more in depth with this in future episodes. Like I said, this is just a pilot trial for this. But I was going to do like this week or month in gaming in a certain year. So I chose randomly 1987. So very much Nintendo heavy. There's probably some, Commodore and Sega Master System stuff going on. But yeah, in February, for instance, the most popular game that I could find that was released this month, 37 years ago, Konami released Contra on the NES. Probably not the first game that used the Konami code, but it was definitely the one that made it popular. So that released on February 20th. So what I'm going to do is for Retro Roulette, or not tonight, because tonight I'm going to do a little. I might do a little more Persona, or maybe we'll play this. But I was thinking of doing this, a little bit later, maybe on February 20th. We can actually stream it, but that'll be our quote unquote Retro Roulette game for this week. It'll just be me, so we won't necessarily review it. Next podcast, me and Tom are on. But in the future, I will discuss the games we play on there. But yeah, so the fun thing about looking this up with 1987 is that Zelda 2 was released for this system in Japan, and it would take 2 more years for it to come to the United States. So that just shows you how much different release windows were back in the late 80s between Japan and America, even on the biggest games like Zelda and Mario. So yeah, you might think, I didn't play Zelda 2 in like 1989 or in the early 90s. Well, that was because Japan held it hostage for 2 years while they were trying to sell the disc system over there. So so that's the third segment. In the future, I would probably want to do this a little more in depth and do, a little more research into stuff and just, it wasn't as easy to find. Maybe I'll do things a little bit newer, like as a newer, like the 90s and early 2000s and stuff, like 20 years plus, in the past, just because it might be easier to find information on stuff. That would be from in the 80s, but we might pop back here. But yeah, that is what I am, thinking for this final segment here, is just look at the history of video games here. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. There's going to be changes coming to the podcast. Like I said, there's going to be more YouTube stuff starting in April, just because I'm going to try to pump out new content once it's just me around, just so that if we do the podcast like once a month instead of once every 2 weeks or something, I can filter it in with things I do, just take the audio from something we put on YouTube. Like if I do a news show every week or something like that, we can sort of punch that in and so it's not me talking about the same games all the time on here. So without further ado, thank you so much. This is fun. Be sure to check out the stream tonight. We probably most likely will be streaming something. So it will be either, Contra or a little bit more Persona 3. So once again, thank you guys, and we'll see you next time. Bye.